love to be adopted by his foster parents, and his foster parents would love to adopt him. We can make that happen by voting yes in this referendum. It is important that children's voices are heard, particularly in a court case situation, and that the judge will get to speak to the child directly and not just through a social worker. This is a referendum for all children, but in particular is for those children who are most vulnerable and most at risk. And we must remember that every child matters. Thanks, Oscar.
Thank you very much, Senator Henry. We now call Senator Jillian van Turnhout.
Thank you very much. Successive governments have made promises to strengthen children's rights in the Constitution, and with this in mind, I heartily congratulate this government, and in particular the Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, Francis Fitzgerald TD, for publishing the wording and for setting the date for the children's referendum. Acknowledgement of the need for change is not new. It was first raised in the Oireachtas over 35 years ago by former Senator and later President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, during the 1976 debate in this very House on the powers of the Adoption Board. In recent years, the Oireachtas has spent significant time discussing horrific reports concerning the abuse of children. When the Child Death Review Group report was published in June, I expressed my profound sadness and a sense of responsibility and shame I bear as a member of society that has systematically failed to protect our most vulnerable children. The opportunity of this referendum brings us closer to securing constitutional change that will make a real and positive difference to all children in Ireland. For several years I've campaigned for children's rights. Along with others, we've moved the need to strengthen children's rights in the Constitution up the political agenda, and I'd like to take a brief moment to pay tribute to others whose steadfast commitment and dedication to children's rights has helped us to bring us to this vitally important juncture. Firstly, thank you to you, Minister, and I'd like to commend this government for prioritising this referendum. I'd also like to thank former Minister for Children from 2002 to 2007, the late Brian Lenihan TD. Brian Lenihan was the first Minister for Children to secure a seat at the Cabinet table. He was instrumental in securing significant advances for children during his tenure, and he recognised the need to bring about constitutional change for children and threw his energies into examining this issue. I'd also like to pay tribute to former Deputy Mary O'Rourke, who in her role as Chair of the Joint Committee on the Constitutional Amendment on Children worked to secure all-party agreement on this issue. She was aided by all members of the committee, but I would like to pay particular tribute to the now Minister Alan Shatter TD and Deputy Queeveen O'Quailon TD, who in their respective roles as opposition spokespersons showed great leadership. I'd like to pay tribute to the NGOs and civil society organisations who have been convinced of the need to strengthen children's rights in the Irish Constitution for a long time and have campaigned relentlessly to spur us onto this point. In particular, I should highlight the role of the Children's Rights Alliance, Barnardo's and the ISPCC, along with over 100 member organisations of the Children's Rights Alliance. And last but most certainly not least, Dr. Jeffrey Shannon, whose expertise on child and family law is renowned, and I believe his work as Special Rapporteur on Child Protection has heightened public awareness. And now to move to the amendment before us that will shortly go before the people of Ireland for their considered opinion. I don't think it will be a surprise to you that I would have preferred if it had gone further in a number of areas, particularly in stating certain rights such as the right to identity. I'm keenly aware that more than 50,000 adopted people have no automatic legal right to their birth certificate, no legal right to their medical information or history, or any legal right to trace information about their identity. I believe that we will be able to partly address this issue through legislation, but that aspects may need to be addressed at constitutional level. And so I note here today that this is an issue that I will continue to advocate for legislative and constitutional change on. Minister, I did consider tabling some amendments, but felt after long and considerable reflection that the wording of this proposal before us strikes an appropriate balance. But, Minister, I will be in outlining some of my points today, and at committee stage hope to get your commitments and obviously reserve the right to put down amendments at report stage if I feel necessary. While I've long awaited this referendum, I know that even a successful referendum will not be a panacea to solve all ills, and there are many issues facing children and families today that I will continue to advocate strongly for, both inside and outside the Seanad. I believe it is our role as legislators to be ambitious on behalf of the people of Ireland, and in this case, on behalf of children and their families. I am convinced that a constitutional amendment on children's rights is absolutely necessary. It is needed to overcome legal roadblocks that are preventing us from fully protecting children and supporting families, that is hampering us from making decisions that are child-centred, and is preventing us from reforming our adoption laws. And to turn my attention briefly to the campaign periods that we're about to commence. In years gone by, children were seen but not heard. I really hope that we won't have a campaign where we see but don't hear, that we will see posters on lampposts but the airwaves will be practically silent and the decisions are made in a void. I believe that the media will have a critical role to play. From speaking to groups over the last few days, I believe there's a real appetite to know exactly what people are being asked to vote on. People don't want to hear about generalities about children's rights. They want to understand what this amendment means. I've also heard parents say that this amendment won't affect my child. And yes, maybe it won't affect your child, but it is every parent's safety net, which I hope they will never need to use. But if there is a family bereavement or breakup, for example, you'll want there to be a legal safety net already in place. I believe we should not underestimate the power of the people of Ireland having an opportunity to vote on the 10th of November to say, yes, children have rights. So I call on all journalists to take time to understand what this referendum means and to use their platform to inform the public. I call on all the political parties, groups and representatives to use their voices and indeed their feet to inform as many people as possible. I know that several NGOs and civil society organisations have campaign plans in place. It's equally fitting that the referendum will take place on Saturday the 10th of November, the birthday of Padraig Pearse, who when reading out the proclamation in 1916 urged us to cherish all its children nation equally. And yes, I know he didn't literally mean children, but the concept of cherishing children and childhood is something that I believe is close to many of our hearts. I also very much welcome the decision by the government to hold the referendum on a Saturday, thereby allowing young people to go back to their constituencies to vote, and it ensures that schools do not have to close unnecessarily. I strongly advocated for Saturday voting when I was President of the National Youth Council of Ireland back in 1999, and I maintain that this should be the case for all referenda and elections. So let me take the amendment point by point, and I propose where time does not permit today, I'll come back at committee stage to address particular aspects. So if we look at Article 42A.1, the potential of this provision is huge. Its interpretation will be very important, as it is the bedrock of the entire amendment. I trust that the courts will be informing their interpretation of the provisions against the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I believe that this provision should guide and potentially strengthen the protection of children in other areas if read with other laws. It provides signposts to the courts, to policymakers and decision makers that children are independent right holders. And Minister, I'll come back with more at committee stage. In relation to Article 42A.21, and again I take it that people have the wording in front of them, I've stated on several occasions that I hope that the proposed amendment would enumerate the word proportionate, and I really need to welcome this inclusion at first sight. I would like to note for the record that the proportionality test as set out in the law in Heaney versus Ireland, and I think I'll elaborate on more of that at committee stage. But currently, the majority of care planning does not include thinking of a permanent care solution for children. Children can drift in the care system indefinitely. And this provision, I believe, will be a significant shift in how we approach taking children into care. It will reframe how and when the state should intervene. It has the important safeguards built in to protect against unwarranted interventions by using exceptional cases and proportionate. Minister, I would like to note at this point that I did consider amending the Irish language translation of exceptional, to which some have attributed the literal translation uncommon. But I'm now satisfied that there is sufficient judicial precedent around exceptional to allay any fears or concerns that are in this regard. In relation to the articles in relation to adoption, Minister, I'd firstly like to say I very much welcome the publication of your intentions in relation to the adoption bill. It's a very intricate area and will need thoughtful and careful consideration. And Minister, you have mentioned about the 2,000 children that if this legislation is passed may become eligible for adoption, and they're children who've been in foster care for 5 years or more. And we should add, not every child wishes to be adopted, nor every foster parent wishes to adopt. We need to ensure that there are options available to suit each circumstance, and I'd encourage you, Minister, to introduce the adoption bill to the Seanad first, to allow for that deliberation. I welcome the use of the term shall be made by law, although I feel its power has been overstated in some statements. Effectively, it means that provisions will be dependent and in fact puts an obligation on us in the Oireachtas to legislate. And it's in 4 places within the proposed amendment that we need to provide by law. So there will be considerable work for us. I think it's very important, Minister, that you would outline the timetable for the legislation in regard to this amendment. An important question, Minister, I have, and I suppose it's one of these indeterminates, will be how judges will balance these provisions against Article 41. And when discussing N and HSE 2006, more commonly known as the Baby Ann case, I've always stated that strengthening children's rights may not necessarily have changed the outcome of this case. However, I believe that this amendment would have changed the way in which it was handled. In effect, the Baby Ann case could be summed up by saying, you have my property, I am entitled to it, and so give my property back. The judgment in this case followed a long line of jurisprudence in the adoption field, particularly 2 dating from 66 and 85. These judgments are Re J and Re JH. In both of these cases, the court concluded that the child should be returned to its natural parents. This amendment, I believe, would have allowed for baby Anne to be viewed as an autonomous being with constitutional rights, the same as any other citizen, not greater or lesser, but equal. And I think that is hugely significant. Minister, when we look at Article 42.8.4, I recognise that you wish to exclude cases taken against the state by using the term brought by the state. But I do believe that this was unintended consequences which I'd ask you to commit through legislation. In particular, I would cite, Minister, the Child Abduction and Enforcement Custody Order Act in 1991. I'd also, Minister, like to note that I've heard in the Dáil last week and today the Kilkenny, Roscommon and indeed the Child Debt Report cited. And I do need to note and put on the record that this provision does not remedy the failure of the state to act on the concerns of family and extended family members, which were key features in these reports. And this does concern me, and I think it's an issue that we need to come back to. Okay, I'll do my best. I would also like to note that the majority of children who come into care are outside of court orders of the Child Care Act 1991, as they are in care on a voluntary arrangement. So in addition, Minister, I do worry about homeless children will not be covered by this constitutional provision if they're provided with accommodation under Section 5 of the Child Care Act. So I'd ask the Minister to commit to bring legislation covering these categories of children, to bring them into line with the principles outlined within this constitutional amendment. Tomorrow I'll also raise with you, Minister, about the forthcoming mediation bill being brought forward by Minister Shatter. I'm just trying to move to the end of what I need to say. I have so much to say on this, Minister. I also do want to welcome the listening to children about forming their opinions. International standards and guidelines recognise the importance of engaging with and listening to children in order to fully guarantee their right to participate in court processes. And I really welcome the wording you put there. So in conclusion, let me end with a question that I've been constantly asked since the wording was published. Will this make a positive difference? My answer is an unequivocal yes. Reforming the Constitution is a fundamental step towards making Ireland the best place in the world to be a child. A constitutional amendment is only one step, albeit a critical one. As part of my current and previous role, I've met many survivors of abuse who've shared their experience, their hurt and their nightmares. In every case, these individuals of such integrity have encouraged me to advocate strongly to strengthen children's rights in our Constitution. So in part, I see this amendment as a way of atoning for our past, while ensuring the children of today will be protected and cherished. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a very pragmatic person who's working to bring about positive change to people's lives. I try not to get caught up in theory, but prefer to focus on areas that will make a difference. If the people of Ireland say yes on the 10th of November, I believe our work will only be just beginning. I hope that I've outlined some of the challenges to you today. I believe the wording is tightly and well drafted. I think the clear message to the people of Ireland is that this is setting us in a new direction. It's not a minimum, but more of a starting point. So, Minister, thank you wholeheartedly for all of your work and your commitment to date. I think we've already seen some of the fruits of your work. Thank you. And thank you to the Mayor.
Thank you.